Hi everyone, it's me, Dr. Schultz, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about phonology and what teachers need to know about phonology to support emergent bilingual learners in their mainstream classroom. In this module, which will take about 10 minutes or less, we will talk a little bit about the key concepts and terminology of phonology. We'll talk a little bit about the socio-linguistic aspects of phonology, and we'll talk a little bit about ways to support phonological development in the mainstream classroom with emergent bilingual or English language learners. Okay, so first let's talk about what phonology is, and there's some key concepts that I want you to know. Phonology is the study of sounds and its sound systems. Every language has a sound system except for ASL. Okay, so another key concept is this idea of phonemic awareness. Think about if you've ever had an experience of being in a foreign country or being in a place where you don't know the primary language, and you listen to it, and you cannot tell at the beginning where one word starts and another one ends. It all sounds like a jumble to you. Well, think about our entering level emergent bilingual students, newcomers, etc., coming into the school system, listening to English for the first time. They haven't developed what's called phonemic awareness. That's an understanding that each word is made up of a series of sounds, and they're able to identify those sound components of a word. Okay. The other major concept and organizing structure of phonology is are consonants and vowels. Okay, and so couple of things are really important. Three things are really important about consonants and determine the sound of consonants, and they all have to do with articulation and voicing. So the articulation of place has to do with where the sound is produced in the vocal tract. So in sounds that are produced in the back, like a sound, is produced in the back of the throat, and that's a guttural sound. A lot of languages, like Hebrew, for example, or Dutch, have a lot of guttural sounds. And then there's the second aspect of consonants to consider is the manner in which they're articulated. And the manner just has to do with the amount of how airflow goes through the vocal tract. Okay, so you can have things like different combinations of manner of articulation and the airflow. Oh, and I forgot to tell you about voicing. Voicing is really whether there's a vibration of the vocal, whether the vocal cords are used, and you can feel it when the vocal cords are vibrating. So, b. Okay, so if you're doing, you do two very similar articulated sounds like p and b, right? When you're doing p, okay, I'm not really crazy. When you do p, like that initial p sound, your vocal cords, they won't move, right? If you hold your hand right here in your vocal cords. But if you make a voiced consonant, like b, you can feel it move. Okay? So that's voiced or voiceless. So this combination of place, manner, and voicing, those three factors together contribute to this whole idea of sounds and articulation. We can also consider with articulation the aspects of stop sounds. So certain sounds, you produce, the air goes through your mouth, and it stops. It doesn't go on forever. Okay, fricatives. I like that word fricatives. If you've studied linguistics before, it's come up before. Fricatives is are sounds like f or v or h. Okay. Affricates are words that are like those crashing sounds. Affricates are like ch and j in the English language. nasals. Nasal sounds, as its name suggests, the airflow is coming kind of through your nose, like a or the ng and the ing words in English, and then liquids and glides, like l and l and r. Those are liquids and glides. Liquid helps you remember it, and r. Okay. So why does that matter? Well, different languages have different sounds, and different students that we work with may have will have different phonological strengths that they'll come to your classroom with, but there'll be contrasts between their dominant language and the English language that they're learning. Okay, so you have to be aware of that and know how. Just being aware of it is going to help you support it, support their development in English, and make it visible to them as well. For example, Spanish speakers may have struggles rather with initial sound, and they may say, for example, in Spanish, they may say Spanish, and okay, as they're beginning to learn. Or Chinese, Mandarin dominant students may struggle hearing and producing the differences between the glide, okay, the liquid and the glides, okay, because they can't really even hear the difference and it's not something that's prominent in Mandarin. Okay, so all of those things come up. So we don't want to think about phonology in some kind of vacuum, right? Phonology, it exists in a social linguistic space, right? So there are influences. Think about anyone maybe yourself, or someone in your family, or a neighbor, or a good friend that has a particular accent. And I want you to think about those range of accents, and then think about whether they all have the same value in our society. Are there some accents that are considered more exotic or prestigious or interesting, while others are considered something that is associated with poverty or low class? Okay, these are terrible things. I'm not saying that these are the right things. These are things that are, in any society, particular accents are associated with, have sociolinguistic influences and connections. So we have to think critically about those things, okay? Because all language sound systems are equal, right? But in our society, that certain speakers of certain languages with certain accents have more struggles, okay? And that's going to relate to this whole relationship to speech and sound, okay? So certain folks will, as they get older, will hold on to particular accents. Lightbound Spada gives an example of this in their book, in the chapter that you're reading, that some students, some learners of language will hold on to an accent because it's part of their identity, and they have some kind of, even if this is conscious or unconscious, some resistance to joining a dominant linguistic group because they may fear losing their identity, or they may feel that this is a way to just resist losing their language. And also, I can't say the word. It's not rebellion, because that's conscious, and this might not be that well thought out. But think about those folks who may hold on to those aspects of their phonological characteristics of their first language, to maintain that as part of their identity. Keep in mind that every single language, even one's L1, is going to have different sound systems. Everyone has an accent. Every single person speaking a language has an accent that is going to be influenced by the region and the speakers that are around them, what they've heard, what they've listened to. Okay? Another important point too is this whole aspect of how close a language is to another in appropriating the sound. I'll say something about that in the next slide. All right, so we have determined these big aspects of phonology, key concepts of phonology. Now we need to think about how to support that in a language classroom, supporting phonological development in an emergent bilingual classroom, an emergent multilingual classroom. And I said I would mention something, and that is research suggests that the closer a language is, whether if it's in the same language family, say Dutch and German and English, or Afrikaans and Japanese and Finnish, closely related, Slavic languages like Polish and Russian. These are all language families. The closer that they're related in their sound system, the easier it is to transfer that sound system if you're a language learner from one to another. For example, what I'm saying is a Spanish speaker will be able to learn Portuguese sound system a little bit easier, and vice versa. An English speaker may be able to learn Afrikaans sound system, the language of South Africa, in an easier way. That's just something that's kind of important. But anyway, so what can you do? I know a lot of you are different. You're studying either elementary or secondary level or for adults, but there are some general principles you can consider when creating instruction for your emergent bilinguals to support their phonological development. You can look for opportunities for extended discourse in groups, in small groups or whole groups. Okay, ask students to follow up. Okay, ask them if you don't understand to be very clear about what they're saying. Give them a model. Recast what they're saying. You shouldn't be correcting. Error correction should not happen on a constant basis. It'll just be it's punitive, and it's just really demoralizing, and third, it doesn't help them learn a language if you have to stop every 5 seconds and recast what the student is saying. No. If it's breaking down meaning, then you need to offer some kind of support that way. You can also create instruction around group projects, which the students have to use the new language around a shared goal. You can do things like read aloud. That doesn't mean round-robin reading. That's useless. But you can do choral reading to support prosody, rhythm, and stress. Create role plays, and also do things like readers' theater, which your students are in an elementary context. But this can really be used across the board. Have the students take a narrative, and then they create a little play about it. All of these things are something you can Google, and you can see a lot of different examples on Coloring Colorado or Teaching Channel or YouTube. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions about phonology. And this week you're going to have an opportunity to spend some time applying phonology, the phonological principles, looking at actual language learners. So good luck with that, and thank you.